Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road, where my guest today from Gateway Woods is Rob Parker. Rob, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Mitch.
You have an amazing story of restoration, and I just want to pick it up in your childhood. Can you describe what family life was like for you?
Sure. I was born right in the middle of a second or third generation cycle of dysfunction, poverty, abuse. Dad was an alcoholic, drug addict. He was abusive to me and my mom. So it was pretty rough growing up. Not a lot of great memories being a kid. And that's what kind of led to a lot of the mistakes that I made, and taking responsibility for what I did, but knowing that, man, I was a wounded kid. I was hurt in a lot of ways, and adults didn't seem like safe people. And so from there, I formed a whole kind of worldview of, people are just going to let you down.
It was verbal and physical abuse, right?
Yeah.
And he would take you to church.
Yeah, so we'd go to church. For a young kid, it was super confusing that we'd go to church and I'd hear the stories about Jesus, and I'd go to Sunday school, and then we would come home and I'd see my dad be abusive and beat my mom up and beat me up and get drunk. My mom came from a solid family. My grandparents were married for 64 years. She'd been a Christian most of her life. My dad came from kind of the opposite direction, but he sold himself really well. So everybody liked my dad. He was charismatic. He was fun to be around. So when we'd go to church, he'd shake hands and drink coffee, and everybody liked him. There was also this sense of some people knew what was happening. And I remember being a kid thinking, why doesn't anybody do anything? Why is nobody coming to my rescue? I knew that something was wrong. I knew it wasn't what dads were supposed to do. This wasn't what childhood should have felt like. So I grew up kind of disillusioned with the church, feeling like people don't really care. It's just another show. And that most people are probably like my dad. They look nice and they'll smile at you and they'll teach Sunday school, but then they go home and abuse their families. Obviously, that's not true, but to a young kid, it made sense in my mind.
Was the abuse usually related to alcohol? Was he under the influence when he would get that way, or was it sometimes not related?
Yeah, sure. The big outbursts were usually from drinking and drugs, but he was just an angry person. And honestly, I think it came from his relationship with his dad. So it was just passed on. He carried that bitterness and that anger inside of him, and he just passed it along. So he wouldn't have to be under the influence. He just carried that bitterness inside of him.
And how old were you when he left?
So my mom took my sister, I'm not sure, I was maybe 7-ish. My mom left me with my dad. So I was with him for a while. My Aunt Marlene was a real servant's heart, moved in with my mom to help take care of my sister, and then my mom got custody of me as well. So my dad started doing this thing where he'd pop in and out, and he'd say he was coming and not show up. I was that kid on the front porch with my bags packed, waiting for dad, and mom would let us sit out there until it got dark, and she'd have us come in. And sometimes he'd be consistent and show up, and sometimes he wouldn't come at all. And so that was kind of life for a while, and then eventually he just vanished.
Really?
And that would be 15 years before I heard anything from my dad again.
Talk about the house Mildred and Violet built.
So through all of this, I just told my sister the other day, for as hard as childhood was, for a lot of the pain and a lot of the heartache that we experienced, we had something we never deserved in Mildred and Violet. They were my great aunts. So they were in their late 50s, probably when I was even born.
Are they on your mom's side or your dad's side?
So it was my mom's side, my grandpa's sisters.
Okay.
And they were consistent. We were there a lot. We spent summers out there. During Bible school, we'd come live with them for a couple weeks, and they'd send us off, and we'd share afternoons at the lake. And I could share so many stories about them, but they were consistent, never married, never had any children of their own. But their house was a haven for all the kids.
They lived together?
Yep, all their life. So never married, worked at General Electric for 40 years, traveled the world. If you'd go to their house, they'd been to China and Jerusalem and just all over. They just traveled.
Kidding.
They were just amazing people. But their reservoir for grace was so deep. And I think every kid should be loved at least once recklessly. And they loved us recklessly. I mean, they just were amazing, amazing ladies.
Would they take you to church or Bible school or things like that?
Yep, take us to Bible school, took us to church, prayed with us, read the Bible to us. Before bed, my Aunt Mildred used to have 10 Commandments on a gold chain, and she'd read through them all with me before bed. And They were consistently godly ladies.
Would you spend more time there in the summers than you did during the school year?
Yes.
And just, so it became a haven for you, a safe place, a home?
It was a haven. Like, it was kind of an escape. It was knowing that things are going to be okay. You know, they would come stay the night with us when my parents were still married. And I think there was this knowledge of, you know, they knew what was going on. What could they do? And back in the 80s, like, child abuse, it's not like it is now. Like, people kind of had this idea, I think, that, hey, your kid's your business. Melvin and Violet thought, hey, if we go stay the night, at least for tonight, things are going to be okay. They were dedicated.
Wow, what a ministry. That is amazing. So I assume you're engaged with them. They're engaged in your life when you start straying down a different path. I
was just angry. I felt like I got dealt the short end of the stick. I felt like I should have had something I didn't. And even when I lived with my mom and her and my aunt would take us to church, I had this feeling of like, look at all these great marriages and nice kids, and here I am just with all this baggage and all this trauma, feeling like I just don't belong. And in general, I didn't necessarily felt like a fit in like church culture. So I start looking for community, and I start looking for an outlet for my emotions. And that turned into just fighting and doing drugs and getting kicked out of school and just the whole gambit. I ended up getting sent to juvenile detention. I got a GED while I was there, so I got out, and I was like 16, so I had a GED and a driver's license. Didn't have to go to school, so I start hanging out with other people who aren't going to school. And
did you go to Saulwood Youth Center or somewhere else?
So I was at Wood Youth Center, now ACJC. I was there several times. I went to Northeast Juvenile, which used to be on Washington. It's not there any longer. Mm-hmm. So I get out, and I got, you know, GED and license, and I'm hanging out with friends. We're selling drugs. I moved out of my mom's house. I was about 16 years old.
Where'd you live?
With a buddy. Lived with him and was selling drugs, and it didn't take very long to get arrested as an adult for the first time.
Were you selling drugs to adults, kids, all the above?
All the above. Just trying to make a living. You know. And I didn't have a dad. And so I'm out there trying to figure out who I am. So I poured that into, I'm going to be a drug dealer. I'm going to be the guy that, hey, if you see me walking down the street, maybe you'll go over to the other side. I want to be that tough guy. That, you know, so I started hanging my hat on that reputation, and so I get arrested, I go to jail, did a year in jail, got out, and it was right back to it. My heart just got increasingly more hardened. It didn't take long. I got arrested again. Things had gotten worse. I got sent to prison. So I spent about 3.5 years at Westville, northern Indiana.
What was that like, 3.5 years in prison? Walk me through a day and then maybe the season of it.
So a normal day didn't look a lot different than my normal day out in the real world. It just was a lot smaller of a world as well. So, you know, that continued on. I always tell people, if you can't stop doing dirt when you're in prison, you're probably not going to do very well when you get out. Right. So I got out, and I picked right back up.
You did?
Yep.
Because that's just what you knew? I just continued. You did it before, during, and then going out, you're going to do it again.
And, you know, I had a daughter since then. So my oldest daughter, she'll be 18 this year, Azarica. My aunts were bringing her up like every 2 weeks to visit me in prison. The reason I was able to keep a relationship with her, the reason she knew me when I got out, was because of them. Because they brought her up. I mean, it's 2 or 3 hour drive every 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
But, you know, I got out, and it was right back to it again. And
do you go to the same buddy's house, or do you find a new one? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a revolving door. You know, some guys are in prison, some guys get killed, some guys overdose. You know, those spots are kind of taken by other people, and it's really a sad life.
But when you get out, where do you go live? Like, do you think about going to live with your great aunts, or you know you can't do that and do what you want to do?
No, so I had a room there it was off and on mine for 15 years. You know, it would come and go. Sometimes I'd stay there, and sometimes if I needed a break from the life, I'd go, you know, stay there for a while. And the funny thing is, no matter how crazy I was, like, I loved coming home to Melvin and Violet. I knew what they believed, and they knew how I was living, but they had a lot of relational capital to build off of. They knew they could say things to me that other people couldn't say.
Sure.
And so they were planting a lot of seeds. But, you know, I did go back to prison.
For what?
So I was dealing firearms, selling drugs still. You know, I met a girl that I thought, man, she's different. I started to have a little bit of hope of maybe things could be different. And then I got arrested again, got sent back to prison, and this time on a 12-year sentence.
Oh my goodness. What's it like in the courtroom? You're standing there and you do you know you're facing probably even longer than that as an option?
Yeah. One of the things that sticks out to me is that they asked my aunts to be a character witness for me. And my Aunt Mildred said it was just too hard. They couldn't get up on the stand. It was just too hard for them. My grandpa, I'll never forget, he got up on the stand and they said, "Do you know the defendant, Mr. Parker?" My grandpa said, "I've known him since the day he was born." That was one of probably the hardest things I've ever had to do, is watch my grandpa talk. And that 12 years seemed like forever when they gave it to me. And I remember thinking—
How old were you?
Oh man, 22 maybe, somewhere around there. I remember thinking, well, that's it. As hard as my heart was, as bad as I was, I figured this is the last nail in the coffin.
And you got quite a reputation up to that point. You got a rap sheet with them.
I've got a bad reputation. I'm a 10-time felon by this point. Most people had kind of written me off as both the good people and the bad people would all kind of be like, he's done for. He's a career criminal. He'll never be anything different. With the exception of a few. Melder and Violet would be they're the presidents of that fan club, believing that, hey, God could still do something amazing. My grandparents always believed that as well. My mom, she had a lot of her own stuff, baggage. My dad did a number on her. She was hurt. She was broken. When her and my stepdad got married, the healing started, and my stepdad tried really hard to be a dad figure to me, but I was already to the point where I was like, if I can't have my dad, I don't want anybody. Mm-hmm. About 2 years in, I decided I'm bored. Not really that I want to change, but just like prison has ran its course for me. It's not really as fun anymore. I want my world to be a lot bigger. So somebody said, "Hey, you should go to college." And I thought, man, I got a GED at 15, 16. My last year of actual school was 8th grade. I'm like, I don't know about college. I always kind of thought I was dumb. I'd heard people, even teachers, say, "You're not going to mouth nothing, dummy." I believe that. If you tell a kid long enough how terrible, and they're not going to mouth anything, they start to believe it, and I did. But I thought, what do I have to lose? So I went to college. They had Purdue teachers that would come in and teach.
Unbelievable.
I actually ended up doing really well. Ended up with an associate from Purdue and a bachelor from IU. And really thought, okay, I've got 2 college degrees and 10 felonies. Maybe they'll cancel each other out. I didn't think I'd ever really use any of that. So I got out early. So I actually only spent about 4.5, 5 years total.
Why is that?
I got a time cut for college.
Really?
Yep. And while I was in college, I was able to stay out of trouble because I was busy with college.
Yeah.
So I get out. The trouble is, my heart was just hard. I really didn't believe there was any hope for me. And then I ran into the girl again.
The same girl?
Yeah. So I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but she's such a huge part of the story. I ran into Sierra, and it was this idea of, are we supposed to be together? So we moved in together. She had 2 children. I had my daughter, and we thought, okay, what now? We have history, so we know we're moving towards something.
Did you have custody of your daughter?
I didn't.
Okay.
She every other weekend, a day during the week. So we thought, what do we do now? And we thought, hey, let's send our kids to church. That's what grown-ups do, right? They send them. So I called my aunts. Hey, can you get the kids a ride to church? And they're like, oh, we'd love to come pick you up. I was like, well, I just met the kids. I don't necessarily want to go to church. So that's what happened. Kids are going to church, and then we get an invite to a Bible school program. And I thought, I hadn't been in a church in a while. And, all this time there were people pursuing me. It'd be a jail chaplain, or somebody would share their faith with me. Or it's all these times, like looking back, knowing that God was pursuing me. I didn't realize it then. So we go to a Bible school program. Some minister's wife see me.
Are you still dealing?
I had stopped dealing. When I got out of prison, I stopped dealing, and nobody congratulated me. I expected everybody to be like, good job for not doing the things you're already not supposed to be doing.
Right.
But I wasn't staying sober.
So the audience that knows that you're a dealer, they're not going to applaud you for stop dealing. No. And then the audience that doesn't really know the details of dealing, you're not going to go tell them.
No.
Okay, got it.
So we were at this Bible school program, and minister's wife points me out and say, hey, I think that's Rob Parker. I had a reputation even at the church. And that's where my mom went to church. My grandparents went to church. My Aunt Marlene went there. My aunts were from there.
And you would have been in the newspapers for going to prison.
Yeah, newspapers too. I went to Bible school there when I was a kid. So people knew me. That minister comes right up to me, introduces himself, and I'm thinking in my head, like, man, what does this guy want from me? He hands me a card and says, hey, if you ever want to have breakfast, give me a call. And I think, yeah, right. And this guy's going to buy me breakfast and beat me with the Bible. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
And that card went up on my fridge at home, and I kept doing drugs, and things had gotten worse, eating pills. And one day I thought, man, I'm hungry. And I looked at that card, and I thought, what if this guy would really just buy me breakfast? So I called him, and sure enough, we went to Richard's, and all I can tell
Because you're
you,
hungry.
yeah, just because I'm hungry, man. And I start spending time with this guy. I'm like, he seems legit. And then it turns into this, if he's for real, like, what if the whole Jesus bit, what if this is all for real? Which for me is devastating, because, you know, these people are like, I'm a pretty good person. I had no illusion that I already knew I was not, and not only was I not a good person, I was intentionally not a good person. So I'm like, what do I do now? And so we set a wedding date. My girlfriend and I were living together. We were planning on getting married in the summer. This was in, we were planning to get married in September, and this was during the summer. And I was eating breakfast with this guy. I said, you know, Troy, I think I want to get right with the Lord. I don't know why I said it. One of those things you just say sometimes. He goes, well, if you want to get right with the Lord, then you're going to have to stop living together, get married or break up. And I was so mad. I remember storming out. I turned back around. I remember looking at him saying, you know what? I might be a Christian someday, but I'll never come to your church. Stomped out, got in the car, got halfway home and realized, you know, he's probably right. Like, if the Bible's true, then I probably shouldn't be living together. So I get home and I say, hey, Sierra, what do you think about getting married? She's like, we are getting married. So what do you think about getting married tomorrow? And she says, I think we should. I don't think we should keep living together. It's wrong. I never would have expected that. You know, she had even less context for church than I did. Some church volleyball, and that was about it. So I called my grandpa. He came to the courthouse as our witness. And we got married and still had the big ceremony down the road. But now we're married, and we're like, okay, now what? Now what do we do? And as time goes along, we start to realize that, hey, something's changing. I remember praying, like, God, if you're real, if you are who you say you are, then come in and do in my heart what it seems like you've done in everybody else's heart. I remember saying, if you can't do that, then you're a fraud. Then you only care about good people. That's a bold prayer for a man to pray.
Yeah.
But out of love, God honored that.
Oh, my goodness.
And everybody asked, what happened? What was the big moment?
Yeah, that's what I
want
to ask.
The big moment was, I woke up one day and my heart felt a little softer. Like, I just felt like, hey, maybe there's hope. Maybe there's still hope. I had felt hopeless for so long. I thought, man, my heart, I feel like I could be molded still. I remember calling Troy and saying, Troy, I need to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. He's like who? I'm like, I just need to talk to somebody. So I went.
Troy's the pastor?
Yeah,
you yelled at. Yep. You're now calling him back.
Yeah, so we had kept meeting. I mean, I never told him that I thought he was right, but we did keep meeting together. And he took me to a minister's house that was from our same church, and I just kind of poured everything out. And that was the beginning of my walk.
Oh my goodness. How old are you then?
About 28, 29 maybe. My wife followed shortly after. A couple months later, she made a beginning with the Lord too. But we had no idea how to do marriage, how to manage money, how to raise kids. We didn't have any idea how to do any of it. And I'm so thankful that we had my mentor, and she had some gals that came around her, and a guy came and said, hey, I'll help you figure out a budget and finances. Another guy from church gave me a job on a hog farm, a legit, like, real job. So I'm going from drug dealer and living in the streets to working on a hog farm. But those guys are pouring into me. You know, we have all this community kind of just lifting us up and doing a relationship with us. And it created huge change for us and our kids. We had I had a daughter, Willow, my youngest, she just turned 6. So now we've got Dominic, Azerica, Jasmine, and Willow. We're learning how to do parenting. We're learning what holiness looks like and restoration, all these different things. And it was really an amazing journey up to that point.
So you were getting discipled?
Yeah, we're being discipled.
How does it affect your relationships? How do you look at you probably had a trail of wrecked relationships, I would think.
Some of them by my own volition, some outside of my control. I'll tell you the first one is there's been such healing in my relationship with my mom. Like, we're really, really close. She's close to our kids. My stepdad, Jeff, as well. We're close. They live in Florida, so they're a little bit farther away and have nicer weather, but we're close.
Yeah, it's good to go visit them.
My dad, shortly after I became a Christian, the first thing that God dealt with was my bitterness towards my dad. And then he calls. We invited him to our wedding. our big kind of celebration. Didn't think he'd come. He did. I wasn't a Christian yet.
This is your biological father
Yep.
who used to beat you,
Yep.
alcohol and drugs himself,
So
abusing.
he went back to where he came from. And then when we came to know Christ, God dealt with that bitterness. And then my dad called and said, hey, I'm sick. I have a disease. It's rare. They think I'm going to die in 6 months. And I said, move to Indiana, come live with us.
Oh my goodness.
Long story short, he moved in with my wife and I. We had some rough hills for a while, and then he came.
By rough, you mean relationally, or
Yeah, I mean, I was
illness?
kind of the authority, which is weird. Like,
Yeah.
we'd catch him smoking pot in the bedroom.
Oh my
and
goodness.
just things like that. But the sicker he got, the more I think he started feeling like, hey, is there still hope for me? And, the long and short of it is I discipled my dad. He made a public profession, was baptized. He got to know my kids. He built a great relationship with them.
Oh my
He and
goodness.
I and my wife, he restored. He ended up being like best, we call it BFFs with my stepdad. So my dad and my stepdad ended up being great friends.
Really?
And all these amazing things happened, and then my dad died.
What was his disease?
It was aspergillosis. It was a really rare. He used to say, I wish him and Zach Birch were really good friends. My friend Zach died of cancer as well. He used to tell Zach, I wish I had cancer. At least they'd know what to do with me. They got a lot. They encouraged one another so much. But yeah, it was sad because I didn't have a dad. And then we built this great relationship, and then he was gone again. But I was thankful that it happened. We were all there. My whole family was there when he died.
That's incredible. That's almost, you can't make something like that up. That's just so unique, and God's hand all the way through it, because it's interesting. It makes me think of 2 Corinthians 5, that he's reconciled us with him so that we'll reconcile with others. We're his ambassadors, and that's what you became.
Yeah. And then with my aunts, like I said, they always were a picture of love and grace. But when we came to know Christ, when we really started to grow, because there hit a point, it was ups and downs for us. It was 3.5 years, 4 years of just way up here and way down here. That we hit one point where I was all the way back at square one. And my wife says, look, you got to make a decision. Are we going to follow Christ, or are we going to do this thing? And that was the moment where we decided, it was like, God, we're going to trust you completely. We're going to lay it all down. And that's the moment, like my relation, I had always loved Melder and Violet, and they always loved us. They loved our kids. It's such a close relationship with all of us. But that was the moment it became this like kinship in the spirit of like, they knew like we're serving, we're striving after Christ, we're living in the spirit, we're loving and serving and doing all the things that they taught us to do. As they poured into us, we're pouring into others. So all these relationships, like I stand here now and I think I feel right with the Lord and right with men. And that is an amazing testimony from where I came from. I feel like God really restored so many relationships in our lives. It's amazing.
Violet went home to be with the Lord on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, so Melder passed away 4 years ago, which was really hard for us. We still had Vi, so it was this, okay, we don't have both, but at least we still have one. And we just poured into her. But I'm thankful that they taught us so much. They poured so much into us. And they would want us to continue to invest into others. If we're getting poured into, we should be pouring into others. And they taught us how to do that. They taught us how deep and wide the reservoir of grace should be, and what the love of Jesus really looks like, and hope. Man, they had hope like I've never seen it before.
And speaking of that hope, describe what Gateway Woods is and how you ended up there.
Man, how I ended up there, we started pursuing, so it's a residential facility, a Christian-based residential facility for troubled teens, and we started applying to be house parents. But every time we applied to be house parents, something happened. My dad got sick, so the timing wasn't right. Then my Aunt Melder died, and I needed some space. And then they started advertising for the LARC program. I went to a wedding, and 3 different people mentioned to me this LARC initiative that was happening at Gateway Woods.
Linking to attain responsibility and community.
So I start looking at it, and it's this whole idea of facilitating connections between kids aging out of foster care, unsupported youth, young adults, people that just don't have solid supports, and connecting them with jobs and mentors and church communities and all the things that they need to kind of thrive and to grow. And I'm looking at this, and because of my story, I'm like, this makes sense. This is what was done with us, with Sierra and I and our family. So I'm like, this is awesome. But I'm a 10-time felon. So I applied for the job, and Gateway offered it to me, and the state was like, no way. We filed a waiver, and I had about 30 people from the community. One of them was my former probation officer.
Oh my goodness.
That wrote recommendations saying, hey, this is what we want for kids. And the state wrote back. It took a long time, but they got back to us and they said, let's do it. And so we're coming on 3 years here that we've been building the program. And I call it a program. The whole idea is that we don't want kids to feel like they are in a program.
Right.
We just want to be looked at as allies. Like, we want to walk with you. We want to help you get all the resources and relationships put into place to support you as you transition into independence. So it's really about love, grace, and connection and investment. So I feel like I was well groomed for this by people.
Sure were. You know, Rob, they say my dad always used to say, the strongest steel is made in the hottest fire. Yeah. And you just exhibit the strength, as you keep saying, of the grace and the hope of God. And I just want to thank you for sharing with us today.
Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
Our prayer for you is that you would find the hope available in Christ. Maybe you're running in the opposite direction from Him, and it's time to just stop and turn, do a 180, and start running toward the hope of God, who is Christ. 1 Timothy 1:1 says that hope is a person. It's not an idea, it's not wishful thinking like our Western culture tells us. It's confident assurance, and that confident assurance is a person. It's Christ. And so turn to the only hope that can give you life abundant now and eternal life with Him. Just say to God, you know, simple 2-sentence prayer, I can't, you can. I can't pay for the penalty of my sin, my pathway opposite from you. God in Christ, you can. I can't free myself from the power of sin. God in Christ, you can. I can't is repentance. You can is faith. And God will begin to make you new. And on the other side, you will be free from the presence of sin. God bless you. If you've prayed that prayer, we invite you to visit our website or email us and let us know about the next steps on your journey.
Anybody making their way through life needing the wisdom of God is going to find this read a compelling and helpful read, so I highly encourage you to pick it up. I'm so grateful for Mitch. His wisdom has helped me in countless ways, and the insight and the application that he brings in this is going to serve your journey and your process in a fantastic fashion.